They say betrayal feels like a knife in the back, but they're wrong. It's slower than that. Quieter. It creeps in through everyday moments, a late-night gym session, a second glass of wine, a brother's easy smile. I didn't see it at first. I didn't want to. But the signs were there, all of them. What I thought was a strong marriage turned out to be a carefully built illusion. What I thought was brotherly support was something far uglier. And by the time the truth finally showed itself, in the most humiliating way possible, it was too late to undo any of it. This is the story of how I lost my wife, my brother, and almost everything I believed in. But it's also the story of what came after, the fire, the fallout, and the slow, stubborn climb back to something real. You think you know how you'd react. I thought I did too. I was wrong. 5 years ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I wasn't trying to be anybody special, just a regular guy with a good job, decent credit, and some pride in what I did. I managed IT projects for a mid-sized software firm. The kind of job nobody talks about at parties, but one that pays the bills, keeps the lights on, and leaves you just enough energy at the end of the day to enjoy a cold drink and a good show. Solid, stable work. I'd worked my way up from the help desk, earned every promotion the slow way, grinding, double-checking, staying late while flashier guys went home. I was proud of that. By 30, I had a smart little condo just outside the city. 2 bedrooms, one I turned into a tech cave with monitors and smart lighting, the other for guests we never really had. Like I built something. That's where Inessa comes in. I met her at a rooftop party thrown by one of my coworkers. One of those after-work things in late May. I wasn't in the mood to socialize that night. I showed up, told myself I'd stay 30 minutes, then sneak out early. But then she laughed. Not at me. Not even near me. But this laugh, God, it cut right through the noise. Clear and full and real. She was standing near the bar, telling some story with her whole body, like she lived inside her own little spotlight. Curly brown hair pinned up messily, sundress swaying just enough to notice. She wasn't the kind of beautiful that tried too hard. She didn't have to. We ended up next to each other in line for tacos, and she smiled at me like she already knew who I was. Said something about how everyone there looked like they'd rather be at home. I admitted I was already planning what to order later from my favorite takeout spot. She laughed again. Told me I didn't talk much. I told her I was trying not to embarrass myself with hot sauce on my face. I don't remember everything we said, but by the end of the night, we were sitting on the rooftop edge with our legs swinging off the side, trading favorite movies and worst first dates like it was second nature. Our first actual date was a week later. Thai food and a walk through the sculpture park downtown. Within a few months, we were inseparable. She moved into my condo after a year. Brought color into the place. Throw pillows, framed prints, candles that smelled like forests or cinnamon sticks. We made a little world together. She'd be on the couch reading, legs curled up, and I'd bring her coffee just the way she liked it. I proposed on a fall morning after a long hike up to Ridgenear. She loved that overlook. Said the sky always looked bigger up there. I packed sandwiches, a thermos of tea, and hid the ring in my camera bag. When she turned around to take a picture, I was already on one knee. My hand shook, and I barely got the words out. She cried, said yes, and kissed me so hard I almost dropped the ring down the cliff. We got married at a botanical garden. Nothing huge, just friends, family, and fairy lights. She wore a dress with lace sleeves and flowers in her hair. I wore the same suit I'd worn to every job interview I ever nailed. It didn't matter. That day, she looked at me like I was the only man in the world, and I believed her again. We settled into married life like a pair of well-worn boots. Comfortable. Broken in. We had Sunday morning routines, pancakes, and jazz music on low, arguing over which farmer's market stall had better strawberries. Talked about future kids, future trips, future everything. She started a Pinterest board titled, Our Dream Nursery. I started building a smart crib program in my head, because of course I did. I really thought we had it good. Not perfect. Who is perfect? But good. Real. Solid. Built on morning coffee and trust and shared playlists. She'd leave me notes sometimes on the bathroom mirror in dry erase marker or tucked into my laptop case. You make me feel safe, one of them said. You're my home, said another. So yeah, I thought I had it all. Turns out, I was just the guy holding the blueprint. My brother Marcus and I were born only 2 years apart, but it felt like we grew up in different families. He was always the golden boy, even when we were kids. I was the one with skinned knees and straight B's, the one who followed rules and did what I was told. Marcus? He could crash his bike into the garage door, and somehow still come out of it with a popsicle and mom telling him how brave he was. He had that grin, you know? That easy, born with it kind of charm that people just fell for. Teachers, neighbors, even our dog liked him better. By the time we hit high school, the contrast was crystal clear. I stayed out of trouble, worked a part-time job, kept my head down. Marcus got invited to every party, dated the girls everyone else just stared at from across the lunchroom, and never seemed to stress over anything. I don't think he studied more than an hour his whole senior year and still graduated with honors. I envied him in a quiet way, but I never let it turn into hate. He was my brother. When I went to college, I had to work part-time to cover tuition and rent. I pulled network cables in freezing attics, answered support tickets at 2 a.m., and lugged my beat-up laptop across town for freelance gigs. Marcus got a scholarship and studied business, of course. He'd call once in a while and tell me about his professors, or the new bar he found, or the trip he took to San Diego with his roommates. I'd nod, say something polite, and go back to troubleshooting why someone's printer refused to talk to their computer. After we both graduated, our dad, who owns a software firm, brought us into the business. I started at the bottom. My title was Junior Systems Analyst, which was a fancy way of saying I fixed stuff other people broke. Slow servers, bad code, misconfigured firewalls, you name it. I worked long days and longer nights. But I liked it. I liked seeing something broken and making it work again. Marcus, on the other hand, came in as VP of Business Development straight out of grad school. Just like that. A corner office, glass walls, the company card. I should have been bitter, maybe, but I wasn't. It wasn't like I hadn't expected it. He was always Dad's favorite in a quiet, unspoken way. Dad would never say it outright, but he looked at Marcus like he was the future and at me like I was the foundation. Still, we made it work, at least on the surface. I kept things running, and Marcus kept things flashy. He went to client dinners, schmoozed with vendors, posted company wins on social media with those forced hashtags and captions like crushing goals with the dream team. It made me roll my eyes, but clients liked him, and that helped us grow. At home, things were peaceful. Inessa and I were doing well. We had our routines, our inside jokes. Even our arguments had a rhythm, a predictable arc that usually ended with us eating ice cream on the couch. I thought she liked that life, that stability. She said often enough that she did. Then Marcus started showing up more. At first, it seemed normal. He was my brother. He lived 15 minutes away. He'd drop by after work or on a weekend, usually with some new drink he wanted us to try. Wine, usually. Inessa loved wine, and Marcus always brought her favorites. I thought it was thoughtful. I told myself he was just trying to be friendly, maybe trying to bond more with me, or with her, or with both of us. He made himself at home real quick, would walk in without knocking, toss his keys on our entryway table, kick off his shoes, and head straight for the fridge like he lived there. Inessa would light up when he came over, and I took it as a good sign. She'd joke with him, laugh at his dumb stories about clients or conferences. I chalked it up to her just being nice. That's how she was, warm, welcoming. And he was my brother. Why wouldn't she like him? One night, he brought over a bottle of this weird orange wine from Italy and 2 slices of cake from some bakery downtown. Said he passed it and thought of Inessa. She clapped like a kid and gave him this big smile, called him the best brother-in-law ever. He winked and said, "Gotta keep the queen happy." I laughed. I actually laughed. Said, "You're setting the bar high, man." And I meant it. I even thanked him. Looking back now, I hate that moment the most. He'd compliment her outfits. "That color looks great on you." Or, "Wow, you look like you just stepped out of a magazine." She'd blush, brush it off, but smile. I'd nudge him with an elbow. "Hey, easy there, Romeo." And he'd laugh like it was just a joke. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. At the time, I wasn't worried. I thought it was just Marcus being Marcus. Over the top, full of flair, throwing compliments around like they didn't cost a thing. And Inessa? She was with me. We had plans. We were talking about kids. You don't question things when they seem okay. You don't look for cracks when the walls are holding. But now, when I replay those nights in my head, all I can see is the way she looked at him. How close they'd sit on the couch. How often their jokes excluded me. How she'd light up just a little more when he walked into the room. I told myself he was just being a good brother. Now I know better. Inessa used to be predictable in the best kind of way. She liked to plan our weekends by Thursday night, usually down to where we'd pick up takeout and what movie we'd fall into afterward. That steady rhythm was part of why I loved her. It made life feel anchored. But at some point, that rhythm started to shift. It didn't happen all at once, more like a slow turning of the dial. She started going to the gym at odd hours, early mornings, sometimes before I was even out of bed, or late at night after dinner. I remember waking up one morning and seeing her lacing up her sneakers in full makeup. Lip gloss, mascara, hair curled just enough to notice. "You're going to yoga like that?" I asked, half asleep, rubbing my eyes. She didn't even look up. "It's a new class. There's a trainer I follow online. She says syncing your workouts with your circadian rhythm improves your energy." I nodded, trying to keep up. "Does your rhythm require lip gloss now?" That earned me a sharp look. "Why are you monitoring me?" That caught me off guard. "I'm not. I just asked a question." She grabbed her keys and was out the door before I could say another word. It stuck with me, though. Inessa was confident, yes, but she wasn't vain. She never used to care about appearances when it came to working out. That whole morning, something just didn't sit right with me, but I shook it off. I figured maybe she was just going through a phase, trying something new. Then there were the girls' nights. Those started getting longer. What used to be dinner and drinks with her friend Janelle turned into her being gone until after midnight. Then it was full weekends. "Janelle's really going through it," she'd say. "I think she needs me around right now." That kind of language. Serious, emotional, unchallengeable. I didn't push it. I said something like, "She's lucky to have you," and kissed her on the cheek. That's the part that eats at me now. I wasn't just being blind. I was handing her a shovel and helping her dig the hole. Her phone became another red flag I ignored. She used to be open with it. We'd scroll through pictures together, share memes, plan trips using the Notes app. But now, she was glued to it constantly. And the second I walked into the room, she'd flip its screen down, like I was some stranger at a diner she didn't trust. Meanwhile, Marcus was still a fixture in our lives, maybe even more than before. I didn't notice it right away, but his visits started syncing up too conveniently with the times I was gone. I'd have an early meeting at a client site, and Inessa would casually mention later that Marcus stopped by to drop off some new wine she'd been talking about. Or I'd be working late, and when I got home, I'd find that he'd brought over tickets for an art exhibit, the kind of stuff I never had time to think about, but she loved. There was one afternoon where I found a receipt on the counter for this imported French roast coffee, the kind Inessa always said was too expensive for everyday use. She claimed she bought it on sale, but I knew she didn't. Marcus brought it. She just didn't bother hiding it. Another time, she casually mentioned that Marcus had gotten her tickets to a concert downtown. "You hate crowds," she said when I raised an eyebrow. "It's just a show I've always wanted to see. He had extra tickets." She said it like it was nothing. Like it didn't even matter that he knew what show she liked. That he'd gone out of his way to buy something that's specific for her. I told myself he was just being generous. He had always been that way. Marcus liked giving people things, showing off a bit, being the guy who always had something in his back pocket. It was who he was. But then it got stranger. I came home one night and found a photo on our kitchen counter. It was from one of those instant film cameras, the kind hipster cafes leave out on the table. In the picture, Inessa was smiling, leaning in close to Marcus, their cheeks almost touching. Her hand was on his arm, the kind of touch that wasn't just casual. "Where'd this come from?" I asked, holding it up. She blinked. "Oh, that? Must have fallen out of my purse. We stopped by that coffee place near the art center. You know, the one with the photo booth?" It was funny. "Funny," I repeated. I didn't say anything else. She didn't offer more. We used to laugh at that photo booth, saying how overpriced the coffee was. Suddenly, it was her new favorite place. I felt a cold knot forming in my gut. But again, I told myself I was being jealous, overreacting, seeing things that weren't there. Because she was my wife. Because Marcus was my brother. Because I was too naive to think either of them could cross a line like that. That's the part that really messes with you. How you start twisting the truth to fit the version of reality you want to believe. I wanted to believe we were still fine, that nothing had changed, that I was imagining it. But I wasn't. It was a Tuesday. Not a holiday, not my birthday, not some big milestone day. Just a regular Tuesday where things were supposed to go as planned. We had a big software rollout happening that week, one we'd been prepping for months. Everything was set, vendors lined up, timelines approved, tech scheduled on site. Except that morning, our main hardware supplier called and told me their delivery truck had broken down. 5 hours minimum, they said. Just like that, the whole schedule went out the window. I spent the next hour making phone calls, pushing meetings, sending out a dozen apologetic emails to clients. By early afternoon, I figured there was no point in sticking around. My team knew what to do. I told my assistant I'd be working from home the rest of the day and packed up my laptop. On the drive back, I was just thinking about the reports I needed to finish, maybe ordering Thai food for dinner. Inessa had said she had the day off, just a day to relax, maybe garden or catch up on her shows. But when I turned onto our street, I saw something that stopped me cold. Parked a few houses down, in front of old Mr. Dinner's lawn, was Marcus's Audi. The black one he was so proud of. He hadn't mentioned stopping by. I hadn't invited him. My stomach tightened, but I told myself maybe he was just swinging by to drop something off. Still, I parked without turning off the engine right away. Just sat there, watching. Eventually, I cut the ignition, stepped out, and closed the door soft enough not to make a sound. I don't know why I did that. Maybe part of me already knew something was off. The house looked normal from the outside. No lights on, no windows open, nothing unusual. But when I stepped through the door, I noticed 2 wine glasses on the coffee table. Half full. Red wine, her favorite kind, the bottle we usually saved for special occasions. The couch had a sweater draped over the armrest. A pair of shoes by the stairs. The playlist Inessa liked was playing upstairs, the one she used for setting a certain vibe. It wasn't loud, just barely audible, like background music in a boutique. I didn't call out. I just stood there, taking it all in. Every part of me was telling me to turn around, but I didn't. I walked through the house like I was in a dream, each step getting heavier. The air felt thick. Still, at the base of the stairs, I saw more clothes. A shirt. Jeans. One of Marcus's belts. My chest felt like it was closing up, but I kept climbing. The bedroom door wasn't even shut all the way. Just slightly ajar. I pushed it open gently, hoping that I was wrong. That somehow, there'd be an explanation. But there they were. Inessa. Marcus. In our bed. I didn't make a sound at first. I just stood there. They didn't even see me. That's how far gone they were, completely lost in each other. Right there in the room I'd built with her, on the sheets we'd picked out together. The same room where we talked about baby names, where we hung fairy lights and joked about how cozy it felt. When they finally saw me, it was chaos. Inessa screamed like she was the one who'd been wronged. She pulled the blanket over herself like I was some stranger who'd broken in. Marcus scrambled, panicked, muttering my name and backing away like a man caught stealing. Julian, man. I didn't think. My vision blurred. Everything turned into static noise. I lunged forward. My hand shot out toward his face. The sound was disgusting, a crunch I will never forget. He collapsed to the floor, clutching his nose. You broke my nose, he yelled, like that was the problem. Inessa was shouting too, telling me to stop, asking what I was doing. Like it wasn't obvious. Like I was the one destroying something sacred. I couldn't answer. My throat felt like it was on fire. My hands were shaking. I looked at her, at the woman I'd poured everything into, and I couldn't find anything familiar in her face. Not even guilt. Just fear. Not fear of what she'd done, but fear of what I might do next. I didn't stay. I turned around, walked out of the room, down the stairs, past the wine glasses and the tangled clothes and the memories that now felt poisoned. I grabbed my truck keys off the hook and walked out the front door. As I passed Marcus's stupid car, I stopped. I stared at it. All I could see was smugness, ego, betrayal. Without thinking, I balled up my hand and slammed my fist into the driver's side door. Left a big dent. I got into my truck and drove. No destination. No plan. Just forward. Kept my hands tied on the wheel. Kept telling myself not to cry, not to lose it, not to drive off the road. Everything I thought I had, everything I believed in shattered in one afternoon. And the worst part? I saw it coming. I just didn't want to believe it. Then, the only place that came to mind was my parents' house. And I went there. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as always. Blue shutters, trimmed hedges, the old wind chime clinking softly near the porch. It was familiar. Steady. Exactly what I needed. Dad was out back in his workshop, sanding something like he always did when he needed to think. The man could fix or build just about anything with wood. He didn't talk much, never had, but when he did, you listened. He glanced up as I walked through the side gate, eyes locking onto mine for. He looked at my hands, then walked over to the refrigerator, silently took out a can of soda, and handed it to me. I cracked it open without saying anything. He didn't ask questions. Didn't need to. He just sat beside me on the old bench he'd made years ago, the one that creaked in the middle, and waited. A few minutes passed before I finally said it. Inessa and Marcus. He looked over at me, not surprised. Just quiet. I don't know if it was his instinct or if he'd noticed something I hadn't, but he just gave a small nod like he was already halfway there in his mind. Walked in on them, I added. He stared ahead, jaw clenched, the muscles in his forearms tensing. Still, no words. Used to be our bed, I said. Ours. We sat there for a long time after that, saying nothing. It wasn't until nearly an hour later that Mom came home. She pulled into the driveway, carrying a canvas tote from her book club and humming some old tune. When she stepped into a few minutes later, her eyes lit up for a second when she saw me, then narrowed when she noticed the bruises on my hand. Julian, what on earth happened to you? She asked, rushing forward. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat felt like it had locked shut. Dad spoke for me. He walked in on Inessa and Marcus. Mom froze. Blinked. Then blinked again. Her mouth opened, then closed. And finally, her first words I still hear echoing in my head, came out sharp, cold, and so far off the mark I almost thought I'd misheard. What did you do to Marcus? Not are you okay? Not oh my God. I'm so sorry. Not even how did this happen? Her first concern was for him. I looked at her, trying to understand. I couldn't find the logic. My face must have said everything I was feeling because she softened her tone and stepped closer. Julian, I'm sure this is all very upsetting, but you can't go around hitting people. Dad stood up then, slowly, but with a presence that filled the whole room. He deserved worse, he said, voice low and steady. Jack, she said, turning to him. He's your son too. Dad didn't respond right away. He just stared at the floor like he was holding something back. Then he said, not anymore. Not like this. Mom was shaking her head, arms crossed tightly. This could have been handled differently. Maybe if you two had a stronger connection, if you were more attentive, Inessa wouldn't have wandered. That was it. That was the moment I shut down. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just stopped listening. My own mother, standing in the garage I grew up in, suggesting that maybe, this was my fault. That maybe I hadn't been enough. Dad walked out of the room after that. I think if he'd stayed, it would have turned into something ugly. I stayed the night in the guest room upstairs. Same room I stayed in during college when I came home for Thanksgiving or when the water heater broke at my place a few winters back. My phone buzzed every few minutes, but I didn't look. I knew who it was. I didn't need to see the names. The next morning, Dad was already up. He handed me a cup of black coffee and a folded note. I've got a few calls to make, he said. You get some rest. By the end of that day, Marcus's key card was deactivated from the company building. His name was scrubbed off the internal directory. His company phone disconnected. Word spread fast, but no one said much. Everyone knew he was Dad's favorite, until he wasn't. When I walked into the office the next week, people avoided eye contact. They didn't need to say anything. They already knew. Mom didn't speak to me for days. Like I was the disgrace. There wasn't anything left to say. 2 days after everything blew up, there was a knock at the door. I thought maybe it was someone from work, or maybe even Marcus trying to show his face again. But when I opened it, there stood a process server holding a manila envelope with my name on it. He said my full name like he was reading it off a parking ticket, handed me the envelope. That was it. No explanation. No chance for questions. Just a quick exchange and the sound of his car pulling away before I even turned back toward the house. Inside the envelope were the divorce papers. No note. No apology. No explanation. Just clean, cold legal language and a box checked next to irreconcilable differences. That phrase hit harder than I expected. Like this whole thing had been some slow-motion unraveling that couldn't be helped. Like I hadn't just walked in on my wife with my brother, in my house, in our bed. No mention of betrayal. No acknowledgement of the damage. Just 2 neat little words to sum up the implosion of a life. Later that same evening, another surprise landed in my lap. Marcus was pressing charges. Assault. I guess a broken nose doesn't heal as easily as a bruised ego. His official statement said I attacked him without warning, that I was violent and dangerously aggressive. Inessa backed him up, saying I'd been increasingly controlling, that I had a history of emotional instability, and that she was afraid of how I might react to stress. That one hit like a punch to the gut. Emotional instability? Controlling? I'd never even raised my voice to her before that day. But now I was being painted like I was one outburst away from something terrible. It was fiction. But when it's written down on legal paper and handed over to the courts, it becomes something more dangerous than just a lie. It becomes ammunition. My dad saw the paperwork and called our family lawyer. Had handled our company contracts for years. Gray hair, calm voice, always 10 steps ahead of whoever was sitting across the table. When he came over that night with his worn briefcase and legal pad, I could see in his eyes that this wasn't going to be simple. From a legal standpoint, he said, this is bad. Doesn't matter what led to it. When you hit someone, especially family, especially when the other party is backing, the law sees it as assault. We need to get in front of this. I nodded. I didn't have the energy to argue. He told me to stop all direct communication with Inessa and Marcus. Everything had to go through him from that point forward. Every call, every email, every text. And start documenting everything, he said. Even things that feel small. They'll try to twist this. Count on it. He was right. Over the next several weeks, I was pulled into a maze of paperwork, meetings, and mediation sessions. Inessa's legal team came at me hard, arguing that she was entitled to half of everything, including parts of my retirement accounts, our house equity, and even a portion of my stake in the family business. That business was built during your marriage, her lawyer said across the table at mediation. Any increase in value is marital property. Never mind that I'd been working there since before I even met her. Never mind that my shares were a mix of earned bonuses and a partial inheritance from my grandfather. They didn't care. They wanted a slice of everything. We fought back. Jeremiah, my lawyer, was relentless. He made it clear my ownership stake predated our relationship, that my contributions had nothing to do with her. We pushed that angle hard. After rounds of negotiations, we finally reached a settlement that avoided a drawn-out trial. I kept my share in the company. That was non-negotiable. I wasn't going to let the business my family built get tangled up in this nightmare. But it came at a cost. Inessa walked away with half the equity from our house, a portion of my retirement savings, and a cut from one of my smaller investment accounts. It hurt. Not just financially, but morally. It felt like paying someone to walk away with the knife they stabbed you with. Jeremiah told me it was the best we were going to get without dragging this into court for months, maybe years. And honestly, I didn't have the stomach for it. I just wanted it over. As it stood, I was walking away bruised, broken places I hadn't even known existed, but still standing. The house? Listed for sale. My hand? Healed, mostly. Still stiff on cold mornings. My trust? Gone. Just gone. There are scars now that don't show. But they're there, just under the surface. And at the time, I told myself it couldn't get worse than this. But I was wrong. Once the divorce papers were signed and the dust had settled, I packed up what was left of my life and moved into a smaller condo not far from the office. It wasn't anything fancy, just a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a quiet building with a decent view of the city skyline. Work became my anchor. After Marcus was fired, a lot of his old accounts were left in limbo. Clients were calling with questions, concerns, doubts. Some were ready to walk away altogether. I stepped in without hesitation. I knew the systems better than he ever did. I knew what we'd promised those clients. And more than anything, I knew how to clean up the mess he left behind. I spent hours on the phone, in meetings, flying out for face-to-face check-ins. Some clients were surprised to see me, but I earned their trust the old-fashioned way, by being straight with them, by fixing what was broken and delivering what was overdue. I didn't sugarcoat things. I owned our mistakes and made sure they saw that someone cared enough to fix them. A month after I took over his accounts, my dad called me into his office. It was a Friday evening, the place nearly empty. Close the door, he said. I did. He turned around, looked at me for a second, then said, I'm promoting you to executive vice president. I blinked. What? You're already doing the job, he said. This just makes it official. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't asked for it. I hadn't even thought about it. But in that moment, it felt like something real. Something earned. He trusted me, not just as a worker, but as a man. I nodded, cleared my throat, and said, thank you. We started eating dinner together now, and then after long days, usually takeout in his office, or once in a while at his place. He'd crack open a beer, loosen his tie, and talk about the early years of the company. About deals that almost sank them. About partners who came and went. About how hard it had been to build something that lasted. He told me things he never used to say out loud. There were a few times, he said once, pushing his takeout container aside, I thought I'd lose it all. But I kept going. You know why? Because you're stubborn? I joked. He cracked a smile. Because I had to. Because this business, it wasn't just about software or revenue. It was about legacy. I didn't say anything then, but I understood. More than I ever had. At night, I started to feel normal again. I could finally rest without my chest feeling tight. No more tossing around, replaying every word, every lie, every smile that had meant something different than I thought. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was calm. I started running again. Nothing crazy, just a few miles in the morning before work. I'd thrown out the old gym clothes that reminded me of the lies, bought new ones, and got moving. It helped. Cleared the fog. Gave me a reason to start each day with something that felt like momentum. There was a moment, about 2 months in, where I caught myself smiling in the mirror. Not one of those polite, practiced smiles you wear for the world. A real one. A quiet grin. It caught me off guard. That's when I knew I was coming back to life. Not the same life I had before. That life was gone. But something new. Something mine. And this time, I wasn't building it for anyone else. It was a Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from the office, kicked off my shoes, and was going through the mail at the kitchen counter. It had been a decent day. Productive. No unexpected drama. I remember thinking, finally, a calm week. Then the doorbell rang. It was the kind of ring people use when they don't know if you're home or not, quick, unsure, polite. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole and froze. It was Anessa. She stood there on the porch like a ghost. Her hair was pulled back, messy, like she hadn't bothered to check the mirror. Her eyes were red and puffy, her clothes wrinkled, like she'd slept in them or hadn't changed for days. She was holding herself like the wind might knock her over. I opened the door, but only halfway. She didn't wait for an invitation. She started talking right away. Her voice cracked on the first word. Marcus left me. I said nothing, just stared at her. She wiped at her face. I'm pregnant. That one landed like a stone in the gut. I didn't react, didn't flinch. I just kept looking at her, waiting for the rest. She kept going. Told me how after the divorce, she and Marcus tried to make things work. How he moved in with her. How they thought it was real. How she thought it meant something. They talked about baby names. They had plans. Then reality hit. Marcus started having money problems. He couldn't keep a steady job. The new company didn't pay well, and word had gotten around the industry that he wasn't someone people wanted to trust anymore. Clients were cautious. Some walked away without saying a word. They fought constantly. About money. About expectations. About how she couldn't take time off work. About the apartment being too expensive. She said he wanted her to work right up until the baby came. That he stopped talking about baby names and started talking about needing space. Then one night while she was working a late shift, he packed up and left. No goodbye. Just a note. Said he wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. Said he needed to find himself. She said her parents weren't speaking to her anymore. That she had no one else. That she made a mistake. That she regretted everything. Then she said the thing that made me step back in disbelief. I was hoping. Maybe you could help. Just until I get back on my feet. I blinked. Help? She nodded. For the baby. I'm not asking for anything else. It's just, we were family once. That's when it happened. I laughed. Not a mean, cruel laugh. Not on purpose. It just came out. I couldn't help it. The audacity of it all. After everything she'd done. The lies, the betrayal, backing Marcus when he filed charges, calling me unstable. Now she was here, asking for help. I looked her in the eye and asked one question. Was it worth it? She froze. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Just this trembling breath. Then she cried harder, shoulders shaking, face twisted with whatever regret or guilt she was trying to carry. I let her cry. I didn't reach for her. I didn't say anything to soften it. After a minute, I said, I feel bad for the kid. I do. That child didn't ask for this mess. But I owe you nothing, Inessa. Not after everything. You made your bed. Now deal with it. She tried to speak again, but I'd heard enough. I closed the door. I could hear her crying out there for a while. Then footsteps. Then silence. I didn't look through the window. I didn't watch her leave. I just stood there in my own house, my own clean, quiet, steady space, and listened to the quiet settle again. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel victory. I felt done. They broke what we had. Marcus and Inessa took something that could have been good and burned it down to ash. And they did it with full hands and open eyes. All I ever did was trust them. All I ever gave them was love, loyalty, and a place in my life. In the end, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to make anyone pay. They took care of that all by themselves. They turned on each other, broke under the weight of their own selfishness. I just had to stand still long enough to see it all fall apart. And when the last piece finally crumbled, I was already somewhere else, building something better, stronger, quieter. Mine. This time, it's my life. No shared walls. No hidden truths. No second-guessing every word, every look, every laugh. Just me. And it's enough. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done differently if you were in my shoes the day I walked in on them? If you like the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.